Alright, hey class, how's it going? So what I'm going to do right now is just kind of do a little review of everything we've learned about so far. Now I am giving this as a homework assignment, so if you do watch this, you can write a little summary of what you learned in it, kind of some stuff that you already knew, then that could count. There are some people that won't be able to watch this, and I'll have an alternate assignment that they can do. But this is the one, probably a little bit better because you get to hear my awesome voice. Now as we are finishing up on chapter 7 as we're getting ready to finish this book. The last thing that this book primarily focuses on for the last 3 chapters comes to just body systems. And body systems are extremely important because they're what help keep the animal alive. No matter what kind of animal it is, there's a few things that animals need to be able to do. They all need to be able to get food. They all need to be able to take in, to not only take in food, but to convert that food into energy. Because again, without that energy, and this goes for any organisms, they have to be able to do this. They all, for the most part, and I'm not going to say every single one of them, they have to have the ability to move, and there's a few reasons for that. One is to get away from danger. Another thing is to actually find that food. Remember we talked about this, and you'll notice that a lot of these are interconnected because the food goes to energy, move goes to food. They also need to be able to reproduce. They also need to be able to take in nutrients and eliminate waste. This is extremely important. There's ways that we can get rid of waste and then take in nutrients that assist in the method of making energy. And there's other things that go along with these, but these are your basic ones. If you want to look at what an animal is, if you're covering all these things, then you're going to pretty much have a good idea that this is what an animal is, this is what it needs, and these systems that we're going to talk about help them perform all these functions. So the first system we're going to talk about is these two. We're going to talk about skeletons. And then we're also going to talk about muscles. Now, skeletons are important because they give structure. And they're also used for protection. Now remember, there's 3 different types of skeletons you can run into. You can run into the endoskeleton. So you have the endoskeleton. You have the exoskeleton. And then you have the skeleton with no hard parts, and that's just your sponges and your more gooey animals. Now, when it comes to protection, the exoskeleton is really good at that. The exoskeleton is almost like a type of armor that will protect certain animals. And it's extremely important to ones, especially when you're dealing with arthropods. They're going to have exoskeletons which help protect them. Now, us, we have endoskeletons, so this is going to focus more on, it's going to focus a lot more on structure. So that's what your endoskeleton is going to do. Now with muscles, they actually allow movement. Remember, these things can contract and relax, and they always work in pairs. And as they contract and relax, they allow the animal to move through the environment. And remember, movement is extremely important because without movement, you can't reproduce. Without movement, you can't go out and get your food, and which doesn't let you get energy. And without movement, you'd just be sitting in your own waste. Movement is extremely important, and the muscle systems help us do that. The skeletal systems help give support so the muscle systems actually have something to act on. Again, we'd just be a gooey little pile on the floor if we didn't have our skeletal systems. And there's different parts of the skeletal system that you guys are aware of. There's your joints. You don't always have to be made out of bone if you have a skeletal system. Sometimes you can be made out of cartilage. And these are 2 systems that help an animal survive. Now, moving on to the next system, we have the nervous system. And the nervous system helps us respond to our environment. If we didn't have the nervous system, we couldn't respond to the environment. You have your stimuli, also known as your stimulus, and there's something that triggers. Let's say somebody pinches you. Well, you jump away from that pinch, or maybe you get really angry and you hit that person so they'll stop pinching you. Well, that's called a response. So you have your stimuli and your response, and we do this all the time. Let's say you're walking through the hallway and you see somebody with their giant backpack coming in the other direction. Well, your stimuli, your nervous system uses a stimuli of sight. You see the backpack coming, and you're able to move out of the way. Your body will coordinate a response which allows you to get out of this kid with this giant backpack's way. So the nervous system is extremely important. And the way it's going to work is it uses things called neurons. And all this should be very familiar to you. This should just kind of be a review. Now, your neurons are the things that will send signals to the rest of your body, and they allow you to have reactions to things. You'll have your sensory neurons, which pick up what's happening. You have your interneurons, which take the message from the sensory neurons. So here's your sensory neurons. Your interneurons take it all the way across to your brain. Your brain figures out what the response is going to be, and then it sends it back. And then your motor neurons kick in. And remember, this thing happens in less than a second. It is so incredibly fast, especially if it wasn't, you'd be in a lot of danger all the time. Think about putting your hand on a hot stove. You want to get that off that hot stove as fast as possible. You want to get yourself out of danger as fast as possible. So the nervous system is extremely important because, again, this goes back to protecting an animal's self. It also helps it get food because if you're a predator, you have to identify, like, hey, that's something I could eat right away. Let's get going. And if you're chasing that thing down, you have to use all your different senses to notice, let's say, here you have your lion, and it's running through the field, and it's chasing after a zebra. I don't know, this is from a top-down view, so there's its lion. I know only girl lions hunt, but whatever. So the zebra's running away, and the zebra decides to change direction. Instead of running a straight line, to change directions. Well, the lion's got to see that. Maybe he loses visual sight, but he smells something change, and so he can change direction, so he can actually go and get his food. And that's all happening really, really fast with the nervous system. So that's another thing. That's another system that is extremely important for animals, for us, for animals that you'll find all over the world. Now, another system that we're going to run into is the digestive system. Animals need to be able to digest things. They need to be able to eat things. And we know there's the three different types. You can have the carnivores, the herbivores, and the omnivores. And we figured out that carnivores are the only ones that, as a whole, if every animal on the planet was a carnivore, eventually the food chain would die out. Whereas herbivores and omnivores, it's okay if you have, all herbivores or all omnivores. But when you just have strictly carnivores, and you run into a huge problem. Now, with the digestive system, there's a few basic things that we're aware of. Is you have to have. So let's draw a human. So there's a human. This is awesome hairdo. The first thing you're going to run into is you're going to run into the mouth. And the mouth is primarily responsible for taking in the food. And especially if you're a human, you can use your teeth to, mechanically mash up the food, and your saliva will chemically break down the food. It's then going to travel down the esophagus into the stomach, where, again, it's going to be chemically broken up, so that way it can go into your intestines and be absorbed. Now, other animals, they have different ways of doing that. They have their crop, where they can soften and store their food. They have the gizzard, where the food can be ground up, and then the intestines again. So the big thing is the intestine being able to absorb the food, and it has to be ground up. You can't swallow a hot dog whole and expect your intestines just to take that whole hot dog and be able to absorb it. No, it has to break it down into molecule-sized parts so it can absorb it in the intestine. So that's your digestive system. And again, obtaining energy, extremely important. Now, along with that, you're going to run into another system called the respiratory system. And the respiratory system, we're familiar with it. It's comprising of our lungs, or if you're a fish, your gills, or if you're an amphibian, your skin. And the respiratory system, what it does is it takes in air and the chemicals that we need inside that air. It'll combine it with the chemicals that we get from our food, and it helps us to make energy. And can you remember what this is called when you're taking the properties from food and the properties from air? Well, you call that cellular respiration. And cellular respiration gives each of our cells energy, and as we talked about, energy is something that we need, because if you don't have energy, you're dead. Now, along with the respiratory system and how it works, there's that word I always talk about, diffusion. And diffusion is where you're moving from an area of less concentration to more concentration. So if you have air in high concentration over here and none over here in this box, it doesn't segregate itself. Not all the air just stays to this one side, but eventually it'll spread out evenly across the whole box. And remember, it's the same thing as if you drop a little bit of food coloring in water. Eventually, it'll spread itself out completely. All right, so let's talk about the next system we're going to run into. The next system you're going to run into is you're going to run into the circulatory system. And the circulatory system is extremely important because, as you remember, you have your heart working in here, you have your vascular tissue. So your heart and your vascular tissue and your blood is what's going to carry nutrients in to the body. So the good stuff goes in. So here's your person. So good stuff goes in, and it also can help bring the bad stuff out. It's what helps filter your body systems. And so, again, the circulatory system is extremely important because, again, if you don't have that, then you're going to have a huge hard time keeping your body clean and taking in the things that you need. Now, you have a system that works even harder than the circulatory system of eliminating waste. And what this system is called the excretory system. And this is the big stuff. This is the big waste. So this is where your urine's going to come from. This is where poop's going to come from. It's going to be using the excretory system because, again, everything you eat, your body doesn't need, and so it takes all the nutrients it does, and then it expels all the stuff that it either can't digest or it just doesn't need. And this is working all the time because, again, if you don't have this, then you got serious problems with waste building up. And we talked about in one of the classes where people can have problems. Part of the excretory system is your kidneys. And your kidneys actually help filter out the waste that you have. And somebody had mentioned, oh, well, like when boxers are fighting, sometimes they'll get hit in the kidney, and they said that the problem is where they're urinating their own blood. And yeah, the big problem is because your kidneys, what it does is it filters out, all the bad stuff, and it kicks it out of your body. And if you damage the kidneys, you can have, if you rupture it, then blood gets in there, and so you start urinating blood. Or if your kidneys fail, and this is why kidney failure is so dangerous, is because then all these things that the kidneys are help filtering out to get rid of, they can't do that anymore because they're not functioning right. And so the person takes on all that waste, and it can become very dangerous and very deadly for them, and that's where you get the idea of dialysis. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about, and this is going to come up in Chapter 7, and I'm just going to lightly touch on it right now because, again, we're going to talk about it a lot in class. And that's the reproductive systems. The reproductive systems in animals are extremely important because without those, again, you can't continue on with the animal line. It would just eventually just die out with whatever animal you're at. But because they can have babies, they can continue on. And so we're going to talk about that in class, so just be prepared for that. So I'm glad you watched this podcast. It was a homework assignment, so I knew you were going to watch it. And so if you have any questions, make sure you email me, especially about what I'm asking you to do with this. And until next time, take care, and we will talk to you later. All right, bye.